Cafe here at the Georgetown Club in Georgetown. And I forgot last week to thank our sponsors, Georgetown Cupcake. And wow, what a crowd. I am Shane.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have a velvet blazer, but you're like in the Four Timers Club.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Is that SNL in the fifth time when you get the jacket? Yeah. This is
I guess
great.
we're going to have to get one made.
I like this is the Q&A Houthi small group. I like this.
There we go.
This is nice.
It's you, it's Bob Woodward,
Okay.
and it's Chris Matthews.
Really? That's
Yeah.
an august club.
And I think Sally Quinn is about to join it.
Okay.
She's June 10th, so make your reservations.
All right.
But,
I'll let her know she's about to be inducted.
Yeah, no, I know. We just have to think what the club, what the jacket should look like. Anyway, yes, thank you all for being here. It's great. It's a crazy time, and hi. It's a crazy time. And the thing that I think is very funny, well, to me it's funny, is that usually when I do an interview, I have pages and pages and pages that I write up the night before. Then I ignore it, but for you, I have three things.
Okay. Just three topics.
But I
They're
call
going to
them,
go so well together.
I call them Signal Gate, Washington Post Gate, and Bacon Gate.
That's it. The three gates. Okay.
So I think though that we're going to save the bacon for last
Okay.
because usually you eat it first.
Yes.
But it can also be.
It can be a dessert in
it can be a
addition to
dessert.
an appetizer.
And Washington Post Gate's a nice filling in between. But Signal Gate. We've been told that it's a closed case. Is it?
I don't think so.
Okay.
It certainly doesn't feel like that with the number of people who are subscribing to The Atlantic.
And in this room.
In recent days. And in this room. No, I don't think it's a closed case. I mean, look, for those who don't remember, this was this...
Last week.
Yeah, last week before the present shenanigans. My boss and colleague Jeffrey Goldberg was inadvertently added by the National Security Advisor to a Signal text chain where they were planning an attack on the Houthis, like you do. So that happened. But no, I don't think it's over, in part because reporting now out there is telling us that there are maybe 20 other groups just like this. It seems like the National Security Council is sort of conducting much of the business of national security on text messages. There is a lawsuit that's been filed now by an advocacy group trying to essentially get more records on this because these are presidential or federal records under the law. So no, I think that it's actually, the story has legs, and we'll probably find out that there were other pieces of sensitive or classified information that were shared like this.
Is there a body of Congress that's going to do its responsible role and pursue this in any way?
I mean, wouldn't that do it? There was a time. No, is the short answer.
Oh, man.
I will say the sort of, in the normal process of this, of course, there would be all kinds of congressional calls for action and investigations, and there'd be hearings, unlikely in a Republican majority. But the Senate Armed Services Committee, led by Senator Wicker, did ask for the Department of Defense to do an investigation, and they don't call it an investigation, it's called something like an evaluation. It's like between like an audit, it's like a look-see.
Yeah.
So there is some kind of process, but they have no jurisdiction to tell the White House, give us your records, or the CIA. It's just pretty narrowly focused on the Pentagon.
Well, that's okay. So that's that. Now, I'd like you to just take us back and behind the scenes. How this all unpeel the onion. I mean, how did this all roll out? How did you first find out about it? And how long did you all sit on it before the rest of us knew about it?
Yeah. So on March 13th, which was a Wednesday, I was driving to go meet somebody for dinner, and I got a call from my editor, which is not unusual. I mean, Jeff and I talk a lot. And he said, listen, this strange thing has happened. I'm on Signal, and somebody who appears to be Mike Waltz, the National Security Advisor, has added me to a group chain called Houthi PC Small Group. And Jeff and I both covered national security for a long time, and immediately when I hear Mike Waltz and PC, you think Principals Committee, which is the group of top-level cabinet officials that the National Security Advisor would convene to discuss issues of great importance. And you see Houthi, and you're thinking, wait, you mean the people that were the group that we're sort of at war with here? So immediately he said, what do you think this is? And I said, this has to be a hoax or a setup. because why in the world would the National Security Advisor do something this ridiculous? And he agreed with me. I mean, we initially thought we're like, okay, wait a minute, is this some weird elaborate hoax? Is this AI? Is this some group like Project Veritas that sets journalists up to embarrass them? Is it the government trying to entrap you into doing something inappropriate with sensitive information? So we agreed to just sort of let it play out and see what happened. And over the next 2 days, you can now go back and read these messages for yourself. More members are added, and this discussion begins about their decision to launch airstrikes on the Houthis.
And is Jeff sharing them with you in real time?
Yeah, we're talking about it back and forth because this
You're the
happens
only
over
two people
a weekend.
who know.
I think he may have brought 1 or 2 other people in at that point. But for the beginning of it, we're just like, all right, let's kind of sit with this and see what happens. So Friday then rolls into Saturday. And I think I hadn't talked to him yet on Saturday. And was not aware that he had then received a message from someone claiming to be Pete Hegseth, who's in the group, basically spelling out when the planes are going to take off, when they're going to be over the targets, the attack plan. The secretary doesn't like the word war plan.
Right, I was just going to say
we'll get to that. So I was unaware that message had come across, and it's Saturday, and I'm just sitting at home, and I see this news flash that there are U.S. airstrikes happening on Yemen, and I just picked up the phone and texted Jeff, ... And it was at that point where we got on the phone right away and we're like, yeah, this is real. So he kind of briefed me on what had rolled in overnight and through the afternoon. And at that point, what was really clear was we're 99% sure this is true and we want to write about it. And from the beginning, the plan was always that, there's some stories where as a journalist, chronology is your friend. And the story was so nuts that we thought, what we just have to do is just walk everybody through from the beginning, kind of like we're doing now. And that Jeff would write that, and I would work with him and sort of do the reporting around it to find out, okay, did anybody break any laws? What procedures were implicated in this? And so we had to kind of develop this scenario where I would call experts, and I would say, okay, I'm going to present you a hypothetical situation where a senior government official sets up a text chain to discuss an operation.
Are these experts like CIA, ex-CIA?
People who'd worked at, there were people who'd worked at CIA, the National Security Council, Department of Justice, people who'd been in national security law positions.
But not currently.
Not currently,
yeah.
No. And we also talked to former administration officials to say, okay, did you guys ever use Signal for sensitive discussions? And they're like, why are you asking? And
subscribe to the Atlantic.
Right, exactly. You'll find out, maybe. So this hypothetical thing is playing out, and the first thing when you say to somebody, if I were the National Security Advisor and asking you as my lawyer, can I set up a text chain to do a military operation? Their first response was like, I would advise you not to do that. For all the reasons they would walk through. You've got records implications, the Espionage Act. Do you know everybody in the room? Is this okay? What if your phone has been hacked? What if this somehow leaks? And then there was this other spin that I put on it where I said, okay, now let me ask you a new wrinkle. Let's say that inadvertently, one of the cabinet officials on the chain accidentally adds the name of his child's nanny to the group. So Jeff is the nanny in this scenario. And they're like, well, this is really bad if that happens. And do they know it's the nanny? Did he mean to add the nanny? And it is at that point where some of the people are kind of thinking to themselves, like, this is not hypothetical, is it? And by the end of some of these conversations, people are just kind of laughing and saying, like, well, this is hilarious and I'm sort of terrified. I guess I'll wait to see what you write.
Is this for your novel?
Right, exactly. Like, who's asking exactly? So we kind of did that. I was doing some reporting as he's writing, and we're kind of working out the story together.
Did you pull lawyers in yet?
We had people advising us on many aspects of the story. It's about all I can say about that. Okay. But there was a small group, there was our own small group of editors at the magazine that were kind of read in on this and were working on it for several days. And the other thing that we knew is that when the time came, we would have to go to the government and ask for their comment, right? And that would be the moment where we'd really find out, is this for sure a real thing and not really some just elaborate AI prank that someone has done? So that happened on, I want to say, the Monday that we published. So we took a good week with it to really think about the consequences of it all.
Who and when did you let Waltz know?
So we talked to his press officer, and well, first we contacted him directly on Monday. because after all, Jeff has his phone number, has him on Signal.
Jeff, who he doesn't know, and is, yeah, right, I know, well.
So it's like, hi, check your email kind of thing. So we reached out to them on Monday, knowing that we had the story ready and we wanted to go to them for comment. And frankly, in a situation like this, that might seem like, well, that's not very much time. But they have the message chain. Like, they're either going to say it's real or it's not. And there's not a whole lot of legwork that they need to do. It's like, go check your phone.
Was there a big pause at the end of the line? I mean, did Jeff make a phone call? Or?
No, it was more that we reached out to the White House and through the spokesperson and let Waltz know that this request was coming in. It was I thought, a surprisingly short amount of time. I think it was about 90 minutes, and they confirmed it, on the record and said, yes, this happened. The messages are authentic. And once we had that, that was it. I think we published it 5 minutes later.
Have you subsequently heard, just through people you know, how it spread through the small group that they'd all been like, with the nanny?
Wait, how do you mean? Like, did they?
Well, like, did you hear any, boy, you have no idea how this went down,
Oh, do you mean from people in the group? If they're furious?
Yeah.
We have not heard that at this point. What was interesting to me, though, well, two things. One, when Jeff decided to leave the group, and that was early on, by the way. So on Saturday, when the bombs start falling, it's that night that he makes the decision to exit the group. And there were a lot of factors that went into that. I think that was the right thing to do for a number of reasons. But we presume that once he did that, because when you leave a text chain on Signal, it will say JG has left the group, that people would go, wait, who's JG? And that then the race is on a little bit.
And these are all initials, more or less.
Some were initials and some were full names. So it depends, I think, on how they were stored in Mike Waltz's phone. So if they said JG, or they said, I think Tulsi Gabbard was TG, Marco Rubio was his initials, but there were others that were full names.
If you knew, you knew.
If you knew, you knew.
Yeah.
And they were all principals, right? So Jeff leaves, we kind of presume, all right, they may know about this, so operate as if they're aware of it, but nobody was reaching out to us to say, hey, we need to have a conversation. You saw something you weren't supposed to see. And it was also remarkable about the text chain is at no point in this text chain does anyone say, why are we doing this on Signal? Or wait a second, guys, maybe we should move this over to the classified side, which told us that this was a routine thing, that they'd done it before.
And haven't we found out subsequently that Waltz has done these group chats before?
Yes, Politico had a report that there were about 20 of them by their estimation. And we've heard from our own sources too that there were others like, other sensitive groups like this.
I'm sure you were expecting it, but it seems pretty fast they decided to blame it on Jeff and you and the Atlantic, and that you concocted this whole thing. And
I'll say we didn't know what the reaction would be the first day. We had to prepare for the possibility that they wouldn't comment at all. And so then are we in the position of saying, well, we think it's real, but are you pretending it's not? They confirmed it right away. That was great. And then, what they did the next day, there was a hearing previously scheduled where the CIA director and the DNI were appearing. And they used that occasion, because of course they were asked about it, to say, oh, this is all unclassified information. That part was kind of shocking to me, because I've been writing about national security for 25 years. I've reported on classified information. If this isn't classified, I don't know what classified information is.
They need a new classification.
They
need a new classification for classified.
Exactly. It's like, so they didn't really explain that, but then there was this reaction where they then turned it around on The Atlantic and said, these journalists are lying about what's in it, they're exaggerating, this is nonsense, there's nothing to see here. And so when you have them saying, it's unclassified, it's not a big deal, so now we're in the position of somehow taking it more seriously than the government does in terms of its exposure, what would happen if it were exposed, and saying that The Atlantic is deceiving them. I don't think we had any real choice but to publish the full texts, which we did that Tuesday.
And how was that decision arrived at, and did that involve lawyers?
That was a pretty quick decision because I was monitoring the hearing. It was
fair game, right?
Yeah, I think that was our position.
I'm actually curious to know, because I use Signal, but if what you get on an email or a text or Signal, it's yours, right?
Look, this is the equivalent of if somebody dropped off a packet of classified documents at your doorstep. or they misdelivered it to you. And
You happen to take a look, yeah.
I mean, journalistically, I think our position was we were passive recipients of this information. It is newsworthy. And now we're in the position where the government is saying it's unclassified, which I think for us relieved us both of the sense that, clearly I don't think we agreed, but the government's essentially saying, nothing damaging will come from this. The raid is over. This is not a big deal. So that puts us in a much better position, I think, to publish all of it. And then, frankly, there are fewer legal consequences if
Yeah,
they're saying it's
yeah,
not classified. Yeah.
And we have Shane's book, The Watchers, because he watches these people. He's a watcher. Shane is a watcher. And it's downstairs, and he'll be available to sign it if you'd like to. But you've been on this beat for years,
Yeah.
and we're just in the, I don't know if you call it an infancy when it's a 2.0 administration, but you covered the intelligence community during Trump 1.0 and now 2. What's the difference?
In some ways, it's very different in that in the first Trump administration, while you had a lot of people who might not be who you'd expect to be cabinet secretaries and leaders under ordinary circumstances, now but you had people who run corporations. In the case of Rex Tillerson, Mike Pompeo had been a member of Congress before he became CIA director with some interest in foreign policy. You just now have people at the top levels, with the exception of John Ratcliffe, the CIA director, who've never run a major organization at all, really. So there's this there's less experience than there was in Trump 1.0, but to a person there is just a higher degree of loyalty to the president, and it's much more clearly expressed. It's not just sort of assumed that, well, if you're serving in his cabinet, you're on board with the policies. These are people who've spoken favorably about the policies. So in that way, I think it's just a much tighter ship than it was. And in some respects, they're also more battened down in their posture towards the reporters. I find that the Pentagon, for instance, is just not engaging with the press corps hardly at all, and has really kind of turned very aggressively on them.
But it's interesting because I also dealt with Trump 1.0, and now I'm dealing with Trump 2.0, and I do agree that at the top, they now know where the levers are.
Yeah.
Trump does know how to do. I don't know if I want to say run the government, but maybe run it his way. But I don't feel that a lot of the people at the other levels come into it. They're all very new, and I feel like that they're just waiting to be told what to do.
Yeah, and it's happening so fast,
Yeah,
is the other thing.
well.
Musk has been a huge disruptor in this, kind of barging his way into agencies, and the New York Times had a great report on the tension between him and Rubio, where it's like, who's in charge here?
And now it's him and Navarro.
Right, exactly.
Which
He came
is
and he lashed
really
out at him
made for
today.
each other.
Yeah, exactly. It makes for great social media. But no, it's moving so much faster, and it's like I think that the president came in with a much clearer set of agenda items that he wanted to pursue, including some of the the DEI dismantling, which has been proceeding apace at the Pentagon, at the CIA. This is real stuff that he had
How
planned that
does
he wanted to do.
CIA, like for example with Doge, has Doge gone into CIA?
They have been there once or twice.
And does CIA push back?
Yes, more than other agencies. And part of the issue at CIA is things are compartmented, they're classified. It's hard even for the Doge people to sort of throw their weight around at the agency. And this is another reason why I think they selected places like, USAID. It's lower hanging fruit. It's easier. It doesn't have a big political
Vulnerable.
constituency. Yeah.
Did CIA have a lot of bloat? Does it deserve to be cut back? Or in covering it, do you find that it has everything it needs and maybe needs more?
No, I think that, look, there are the people there now and people who are being selected for leadership positions who want to reorganize the agency in a way that they feel is more efficient and better suited to go against China and other big nation state targets. I think there are people who do feel it has become too bureaucratically top-heavy and would like to undo that. The current director wants to undo that. A lot of these were put in place in the Obama
Just not with a
administration.
wrecking ball, right?
Yeah, but this is
and
like...
I'm sorry, a golden
Well, it's a little more
chainsaw.
surgical, exactly.
Right. What percentage would you say of lifers are still in the intelligence community, both in the White House, in the Situation Room, at CIA, at State, at the areas at Pentagon where it matters most? Because they would have us feel they've just thrown everybody overboard and it's a whole new...
It's CIA and the ODNI, and I think maybe maybe some places in the Pentagon intelligence apparatus. There's still a hefty core of career people who are there, but when I talk to folks, it's the people who are eyeing the exits, who are thinking about retiring early, moving on, not taking the next step. The Homeland Security Department last night just put out a buyout message to all its employees.
I saw that.
So
yeah.
that is now in the offing. At the National Security Council in the White House, I mean, it is down to much lower level staff, or lower numbers than it was when they came in. Those people were sent back to their home agencies where they were.
What do you know about Laura Loomer going in and
God.
taking her chainsaw to the National
Yeah,
Security
and saying, well, first,
Council?
I'm fascinated that she knew the names of people who most Americans have never heard of that she wanted fired. That was kind of interesting. So who's
How'd
telling
she even
her
get in
that?
there? Did she have a security clearance?
I presume somebody brought her in, like maybe Stephen Miller walked her in the door. I don't know if she has
Can
a hard
you even
pass.
go in the room without a security clearance?
You can go in without a clearance. You need a pass.
Okay.
But so she gets there in front of the president and she starts saying, these are all the people who are disloyal to you, who are working for Mike Waltz, who's standing right there, by the way. So she's giving him personnel direction. Look, what I find so alarming about this is that, Laura Loomer is sort of the avatar for
Loomer.
extremist right-wing conspiratorial thinking. And this is now having a direct effect on policy.
Yeah.
That's alarming.
Yeah,
I don't know
I
that
know.
that's ever happened before. And the president clearly is listening to her, because then he turns around and they're removing these people who
Yeah.
she says to get rid of.
Which agency, if it's even possible to say that, do you think is running the most efficiently, though, still within the intelligence community?
Probably CIA. Yeah. I mean, they really have
Have you been in to meet with Ratcliffe, or?
He has not met with me,
Availed
and as far as
himself.
I know, he hasn't met in a group with the press yet. I've run into him a couple of times, but they're still operating on what would be the most pre-Trump 2.0 kind of level.
Talk to me about leaks. Is the paranoia about leaks justified?
You mean the administration's
In
paranoia?
any administration, but I know in this one right now, because no one wants to do polygraphs and.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't leaking just a way of life?
We wouldn't be in business if there weren't leaks. I mean, this is how things
How
run.
government, I mean, because some of the people who leak are the people who condemn it the loudest.
Oh yeah, I mean,
So-
look, when the president says things like, these journalists are making up their sources, he knows that's not true. I mean, I'm sure in many cases he knows or suspects who the people are who are talking. I think he
Or
likes.
ask them to.
Yeah, he likes the scrum. The president actually, I mean, I don't know how much he loves reporters, but I think he likes the press, if that makes sense. He likes to be in the press, and he likes seeing the drama that plays out in it. I think that there are always concerns about the leaks of classified information that could jeopardize operations, and that's what was at play when we were doing the Signal story. We were being very careful with it for that reason. That's different than politics and policy leaks and
Remember
people
famously
stabbing
he
each
used
other.
to leak on himself
Oh,
when
yeah.
he was
He would
at,
call up and say
Trump.
he was John Barron.
Yes,
And he was Mr. Trump's publicity agent.
Maybe he was in that Signal thread.
He could have been. Maybe there are some names that we don't know. I don't see any
haven't.
DTs in the
You haven't.
list. But
Before we get on to other topics, Snowden.
Yeah.
There's been talk about what is going on with Snowden and the freeing of Snowden.
so he's living in Russia.
Right.
I don't remember if he is a citizen or not, but
He
he has
got-
essentially legal residency status.
I get him confused with Julius Assange sometimes.
Well,
who has-
Julian Assange
who
is
has
back in
citizenship,
Australia.
who doesn't have,
Yeah.
but he got like Ecuadorian citizenship.
Well, he was living in the Ecuadorian embassy
okay.
in London as a guest until they kicked him out.
Okay, but
he
it
was not a
wasn't-
good house guest, apparently. No, he's back. I mean,
That's another story.
Yeah, it's a whole other story. No, but Assange is back in Australia. He's out of legal jeopardy from the U.S.
But
now.
is Snowden trying to come back to the U.S.?
Not that I'm aware of. I
So
mean, I
why
think that
is
he
it
would.
even a
Well,
conversation? Are
he
there-
might come back if they cut him a deal that he
Who
wouldn't
wants
go to
him
prison.
back?
Well, I don't know if anybody wants him back. He might want to come back.
I know, but is there a faction that thinks he deserves to be able to come back?
Oh,
That-
sure. I mean, I think probably the director of national intelligence is in the group. I mean,
So, see, this
she's a
is my
fan.
point.
Yeah.
Okay, there,
yeah. I mean, this
there.
came up at her confirmation hearing
Yeah,
where she
yeah,
was
yeah.
pressed again and again. Why won't you call him a traitor? And it was just, she wasn't exactly defending him, but she wasn't castigating him either. And she's been very vocally defensive of him and supportive of him in the past, calling him a courageous whistleblower. I mean, that is extraordinarily awkward for the
Yeah.
nation's top intelligence official to be essentially applauding someone who, most of the Congress and the executive branch would not shoot him at dawn, but pretty close.
You were talking earlier about when the story first happened, and you and Goldberg were wondering if you were being faked. Do you think you have pretty good radar for knowing when somebody's faking it with you?
Yeah, I mean,
Do they try? I mean,
Well,
have they come at you?
it's not so much that people try to hoax us. I mean, it's more that I get a lot of emails and texts from people claiming very extraordinary things that just probably aren't true. I mean, this veers more into the realm of the paranoid, and the CIA is watching me, and they've been doing things to me for 30 years. I mean, you kind of get a radar
And
sense.
you've become
for
the
that.
go-to guy.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of reporters who cover this stuff have a list of people who've contacted them, saying, my fillings are, being controlled by people at Langley and that kind of thing. But like, there's also, I mean, this happens, right? But the more common thing I would say too is that you get leaks from people who think that what they have actually seen in the government or know is more consequential than it actually might be. So maybe they're sort of like overreacting to something. You get a sense, I think, of when, the BS meter gets pretty well tuned at this point. It's also why, to go back to like when we thought it was a hoax with the Signal thread, I mean, we had to allow for that possibility because the scenario itself was so implausible, right? But as people were being added, and these are real names and like real staffers, the thinking was, okay, if this is a hoax, somebody is really going to exceptional lengths to do it. And I've never seen anything that sophisticated.
Where will you go with it now? Have you and Jeff just let it rest, or not that you could necessarily tell us, but is there anything you're pursuing? It's not a closed case for the Atlantic or for you or Jeff.
Yeah, look, I mean, if anybody added us to other small groups, I think we'd report on it.
Yeah.
But, I think what we're interested in...
I'll do that.
Yeah, exactly. Do it right away. Anybody here want to add me? Go ahead. But I think what we're trying to do now is also step back and say, all right, what does this episode tell us about the way that national security is being run in the Trump administration? Because we had this amazing window, both into the sort of, I would argue, cavalier and reckless way they were handling classified information. I know they disagree with that. But also the decision-making process. I mean, there's a point at which they're debating, did the president really tell them to strike Yemen? And the vice president says, I disagree with the policy. The president doesn't understand how this comports with the Europe policy. And then like Stephen Miller just kind of appears out of the shadows and says, I heard the president say this, we're doing it. I mean, that's an incredible window into how this very powerful group of people makes decisions. And that's what we want to start pursuing and writing about.
Yeah, no, you described the Stephen Miller role perfectly.
From the vapors, yeah.
We'll go back and forth, but let's jump over to the Washington Post for a moment. You were with the Post how many years?
7 years.
7 years, and you left last year.
In October.
In October, and you were sort of vanguard of people leaving
I was
the
a
Post.
trendsetter, apparently.
You were a trendsetter.
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about the new Washington Post, the turmoils it's been through, to the extent you're comfortable talking about whether the exodus of staff and subscribers is justified.
Yeah. Well, in some ways, I feel like the new Washington Post is made. In many ways, it's still like the old Post in that they are still doing extraordinary reporting and accountability journalism.
That's true.
Their Doge reporting has been among the best out there. It's really great. But there obviously has been a huge, talent exodus. It's we've been beneficiaries of that at the Atlantic. I mean, I walk into my office at the Atlantic every day, and it actually looks like my old office because I'm sitting next to 5 people who I've sat next to for the last 7 years, and my editor is someone who I saw every day.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of a we just transplanted things into a new body. People really seemed people started heading for the exits, I think, after the endorsement was pulled.
Issue, right.
And there was a huge drop-off.
Which directly involved Bezos, which directly involved the
Yes.
owner.
Yes, I think staff there now have very real and legitimate concerns that the ownership, that Bezos, is inserting himself into the newspaper in a way he simply never did.
Well, or maybe he's who he always was, but people were romanticizing him, perhaps?
Well, I don't know. It could be this is all he always was, but I don't know that they were romanticizing it. I mean, when I worked there and people would ask me, does Bezos interfere in the news report? I could confidently say no, because Marty Barron, the editor at the time, had frequently said he never does that. Marty had been very public about that and was very praising of Jeff for being a kind of stand back owner who didn't interfere in the ways that some owners would, which I think helps explain why Marty has been so vehement in his criticism of Bezos. But look, I mean, there has long been a sense within the Post that the business side has not figured out, not just how do we make money, but what is the business of the paper. And for years we would hear about there's a plan, there's a plan, there's a plan, and it seemed like the plan never materialized. So, I take the position that I think a lot of my colleagues on the editorial side and the news side do, that it's not the journalism that was the problem at the paper. It's the business side that needs to figure out how to sell the journalism. I'm not saying that's easy, by the way, and that's not what they pay me to do.
Don't blame the journalism.
Don't blame the journalism. And look, I mean, it's been very publicly reported that the new publisher had a meeting with staff back last summer where he said, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, no one's reading your stuff. I was there for that meeting. It was pretty brutal.
Yeah,
I thought it was unwarranted. And people are going to make decisions about where they want to work, and that's what's happening. And I think that a lot of this was predictable and self-inflicted.
Has anything changed?
Inside the newsroom?
Yeah, I mean, when you talk to people who are still back there, have they just made peace with it, or?
I think some people have. I mean, morale is picking up a bit. They've had some people who have decided to stay, which has been great. I think that they feel right now that they're through the storm period, of the real drama where it seemed like all the time people were leaving. So morale needs to get picked back up again. I mean, I think that needs to happen. I think the remaking of the opinion page was then another kind of jolt to the system, because even on the news side, these are separate divisions of the paper. Again, it was another signal that things are changing very dramatically. I think very much that reporters who I talk to would like for the Washington Post not to be the story anymore.
Of course.
And they would like to get back to the business of reporting. I mean, it's hugely distracting. I mean, I was there in the summer when, there were 7 or 8 reporters who were investigating our own publisher and his role in the phone hacking scandal.
Yeah,
I mean, that's an incredibly distracting event. And it makes it very hard to really do the work that you want to be doing.
Do you think Bezos should sell a paper?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. Do you think he will?
No.
Yeah. Because you want him to.
Actually, I have no idea what's in the man's head. I've never spoken to him. I've sent him an email.
Well, he doesn't have to
times.
sell it. I mean,
he doesn't have
he needs
to.
The money.
And he can afford it. And I mean, I think it might be like a concession, maybe in a way, if he did it. But to be honest, I think the reason that he should, I don't know what it's doing for him, right? And I don't know that he has been he's been a good steward of the paper in many respects, in that the paper is still publishing, even when it's losing an heroic amount of money, and it can keep doing that. But I don't know that Jeff really understands journalism and media as a business, and many of his decisions in the past 6 months illustrate that, I think. I don't know that but he wants to remake it into something else, and this is now his project.
Was it a WP.com, like modeled after the Daily Mail, right?
I guess. I mean, but when you hear him talk about
clickbait.
Well, they're doing this thing now where they're linking out to other people's articles. Some people will see it on the website. There's a ticker running below the bottom. And so, what we're doing aggregation now, is this like 2005 again? I mean, it's like some of these ideas, they've been tried and they don't work.
Yeah.
And so I have a real concern that, people who are on the business side making these decisions are trying things that have been either demonstrably proved not to be very productive or are unlikely to be. And that's worrying to me. And that's why I think he should sell it.
What was it about the Atlantic, though? Because you could go anywhere. So what? Well, I mean, you've got a Pulitzer, you've got a wonderful resume of the Wall Street Journal and Foreign Policy and the Daily Beast, and so you could kind of pick your school, as they say. But why the Atlantic?
So I had this very backwards trajectory in my career where I started working in magazines. I started working at kind of a trade magazine, then I went to a policy magazine.
I love that you worked for Movie Line.
Yeah, I worked for Movie Line magazine back in the day, too. But I worked for National Journal early in my career, too, a great magazine, which I see an alum from NJ over here. How are you?
Love that.
And, I started out in magazines. I always wanted to be a writer, and long-form storytelling and narrative journalism is what appealed to me early on. I didn't start as a news reporter. And I went into news reporting sort of around 2013 because I'd never really done that, and I kind of wanted to go have that experience. And you and I were working together at Washingtonian at the time, and like I would just love hearing your stories too about like working in daily broadcast news, and I wanted to have that kind of rush. And so I went and did that, and did that for 10 or 12 years or so, and decided I really wanted to get back to magazines again. And I didn't want to, I made the jump before Trump was reelected, but I did not want to do the daily grind on Trump for Trump 2.0 if he were elected.
Yeah,
I wanted to
you
be
need to be
someplace
healthy.
else. Yeah, exactly. I wanted a life.
We have 10 minutes left, and the reason I'm mentioning the time because I hope we can fit this into 10 minutes.
Okay.
The headline is that day after tomorrow or Thursday, Shane will be up for a National Magazine Award for a podcast that he did, one of his last acts.
My last story for the Washington Post.
For the Washington Post, but it was a podcast. And it's about bacon, but it's not just any bacon.
That's right.
It's a bacon that's very well connected to the intelligence community, to Georgetown, and the house that RFK Jr. just bought.
That's right. That's right.
So, Shane, we want everybody to listen to the podcast,
Yes.
so don't give the whole thing away.
I won't. Okay.
But go ahead.
What's the bacon story?
What's the bacon?
So it's 2012, maybe 2011, 2012. And Ben Bradley, the great editor of the Washington Post, has just died. And Sally Quinn, who's about to be inducted into the Four-Timer Club, decides she's going to throw this big last party for Ben. And they, of course, were famous for throwing huge parties at their house, and they were kind of a social nucleus and part of the fabric of Washington. And so I'm reading Roxanne Roberts' write-up of this for the Post. I'm at Washingtonian magazine at the time. And it's going through like who's there, and it was a great final send-off, one last hurrah. And they're going through all the food that was served, and it says, there were ham and biscuits and shrimp and chicken and chocolate brownies and bacon. And it just said, and bacon. And I'm like what? Like on a stick? Like was it passed around like on a plate?
Pack of bacon?
Right. I'm like, was it like flopping around? I'm like, I don't understand this. Like, it clearly was written in a way that was like, if you don't know, you don't know, right?
Yeah.
So I did what I always did when I had a question about the social byways of Washington. I went to Carol. And so I walked across the hall because we were working together.
Yeah.
And I said, Carol, what is this about bacon? And she goes, oh, you don't know about bacon, which obviously I did not. And I became obsessed with this. And as she explained, bacon refers to candied bacon that would be served
That's savory.
But savory, at a cocktail party, in the era and earlier of the sort of Ben and Sally era where, this is what people did. They gathered at these kinds of parties, and they were bipartisan, and it was served both a social and even kind of a political function. But then there was
and you had your own bacon. Really? I mean, Dick Cheney had his own bacon.
Lots of people served different kinds of
learned
bacon.
Right,
you learned that this was a kind of thing, that if you were eating bacon, it was a marker, right? You were sort of in the know. So it turns out that there was one woman, one of these great Washington hostesses, although she hated the word hostess, named Evangeline Bruce, who was very famous for her bacon, and everyone tried to imitate it. And this is true, by the way. I've gone through the archival research, and I mean, this woman was known for this bacon. It was a thing, right? It was the trademark.
Well, because when I found out about, I will just interject myself.
Yeah, how you found out about it.
Because he said, well, how do you know about bacon? And I said, well, I was at this party at the home of Janet and David Bruce, he being the son of David K.E. Bruce and Evangeline Bruce. Right. And it was a very lovely cocktail party in their house on 31st Street, which is now going to be the home of RFK Jr. Mm-hmm. And somebody said to Janet, are you going to have the bacon? And she said, yes, it's coming out any minute. And I went, what's the bacon? And then all of a sudden, somebody came out with a platter of these little pieces of bacon. Mm-hmm. And I went over and nabbed one.
Yep.
And then I basically followed that server all around the party just to keep
eating it.
The bacon.
I mean, it's addictive. I mean,
this
you will eat it all night.
particular bacon.
Yes.
And this is why
it's special.
You did your podcast,
Yes.
and I hope you win, because it is a unique bacon, and we found the woman who made the bacon for Evangeline Bruce.
That's right.
And when Vanjie hired her, she put her through days and days and
my God.
days of making bacon.
Yes, over and over to get
Until
her
she
to get
got
it just
it.
right. Yeah.
But I'll give the story back to you.
Well, so there's this amazing woman who figures very prominently in the podcast named Odette Pereira, who was Vanjie's cook. And Odette had come to the United States from Portugal. She spoke no English when she got here. She didn't even know how to cook. She just sort of like got her way into a cooking job. So eventually she went to work for the Bruces. And it's not entirely clear where Vanjie Bruce had first tasted bacon. Maybe it was in London.
I think it was at some British residence.
Yes, there's some
Not
story about.
necessarily the Queen.
Yeah, I don't know if it was
But we
Buckingham
don't know.
Palace, but it was somewhere when she was
yeah.
maybe stationed in London with her husband, who was ambassador at the time. And she basically says to Odette, "I want to make this bacon." And Odette, for like a week every day, is making it all kinds of different ways to try and get it exactly the right way it's supposed to be. Because when it comes out, I mean, it looks like it's been shellacked.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's not
And
like,
it
you
has
know.
a little crunch when you
Oh
bite
yeah,
into
I
it.
mean it's
Yeah.
encased, right? And so you're looking at it like, how did you do this? And so of course, when I asked Odette, "Will you tell me the recipe?" She's like, "No, absolutely not. I'm taking it to the grave." So the podcast is about that story and the investigation of how do we get right to the heart of how did she actually make the bacon and the role that it played in
But
this
if
town.
you listen to the podcast,
Yeah.
when you get to the end of it, you can learn how to
You can learn. You
how to
can
make
learn.
the bacon.
She didn't exactly write it down, and I'm not sure you could ever write it down. But I have to say, I love to cook. This is the most counterintuitive method I would have ever guessed. I'm like, I never would have come up with.
Spill a little bit. Spill the.
Basically, you just have. I mean, it's two things. It's bacon and it's dark brown sugar, and that's it. There is nothing else. That's it. And it has to be dark brown
And heat.
sugar and heat. And I even developed an innovation that she thought was pretty clever, which is you put foil down in a pan so it's less mess to clean up. And you basically just take a gargantuan amount of brown sugar and you lay it in the bottom like you're lining a sandbox
bed
or
of
something.
brown sugar.
Yeah. And then you just take the bacon and line it up over the top of it and then cover it with more brown sugar. I mean, so it's almost like it's like it's mummified in sugar. And you put it in an oven at 300 degrees and you just cook it a long time.
Yeah.
And maybe half an hour through, you turn it over and you kind of a couple more times, you turn it. And, it starts to basically start cooking in this liquefied bath of caramel. And, and it really smells like you're about to burn it. And it just gets right up to the edge. Like we were making it together, I'm like, "Oh, is it done yet?" She's like, "No. I'm like, this is going to turn into cinders by the time we're done." And so, she just kept cooking. She's like, "You have to smell it." I mean, this is what was amazing cooking with her on this. Everything is sort of by instinct and by
Right.
memory, right? And so once it kind of gets to that point where it looks like it's about to incinerate, you kind of take it out and you lay it on, like ideally like a marble countertop or a cold surface, and you just set it there for 5 or 10 minutes until you can pick it up and it stands straight up. And when you break it, it goes and it crisps. She's like, "You got to hold it up. If it's flopping," she's like, "if it's flopping over, it's got to go back in the oven. It's got to be like this, not like this." She's amazing. She's just great. She's like, "You got to hold it, crack it in your ear, all the rest of it."
Do you remember the time I called you from the Cheneys and said, "Guess what?
They're serving bacon.
Dick Cheney has bacon."
I called the Cheneys. They didn't want to talk about their bacon.
No, and I went into the
I tried.
kitchen, and they were like, "What are you doing in here?" And I said, "Well, because you've got bacon. Can you tell me about it?"
Like, no, get out of here. They use chili pepper in their bacon.
Exactly. His is very.
Yeah.
I think I like Vanjie's
Yeah.
bacon. We should have a bacon off.
A bacon off.
A bacon off.
Absolutely.
We better stop here before we get too.
Before we get too hungry.
Shane, I really hope you win. But
Thank you.
just being, as they say in Hollywood, just being nominated's an honor.
It's
right?
true. It's true. For
Because
Vanjie and for Odette, it's great.
How many podcasts get nominated for a
About
next-
bacon. And I'm up against some very serious podcasts,
I
and then
know.
there's us.
Yeah,
It's
no.
very nice.
But the podcast can be found.
Spotify, anywhere you
Washington
get,
Post,
just Washington
just
Post
Shane
bacon,
Harris,
you'll find
bacon.
it. Yeah.
It's such a good podcast, and you're such a good friend, and you're such a great four-timer. I look forward to being the fifth time. It'll probably be another big scoop, or another Pulitzer, both maybe. But you're a wonderful friend, a wonderful guest, and thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And thank you, everyone.